Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel podcast, the first and longest running female hosted hunting podcast. She's all geared up and ready to chase walleyes in the middle of the night on the Wisconsin River. But first, she's helping you navigate your trip of a lifetime. And now, here's your hostess, Carrie Zilka.
Welcome to the Hunt Fish Travel podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Z. Before we jump into today's episode, just a quick reminder that our sponsor for this episode is 5 Point Trail Cameras. You know how I am. Watch for Trail Cam Tuesday. I get a lot of weird stuff on my lease, and I'm not sure what to do about it, but I love watching all the deer and the possums and the raccoons and the people and the cats on my trail camera. So be sure to check out 5 Point Trail Cameras. I am a big fan. And also Montana Decoys. I don't hunt with anything else. And season is coming, and they are the best decoys in the business. Anyhow, this week we are talking to author Mike Arnold, who wrote this book called Bringing Back the Lions, International Hunters, Local Tribes People, and the Miraculous Rescue of a Doomed Ecosystem in Mozambique. Holy cow, that's a mouthful. In full disclosure, Karen from Hunter Rock PR sent me this suggestion, and she was like, I think this guy would make a great guest. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, have him come on. So, like I said, in full disclosure, I have not read the book. I had briefly heard about, no offense, I had briefly heard about Mike Arnold Outdoors, and I'm pretty sure I've been on your website before, but now that I've taken a deep dive, I'm like, oh my God, I've missed so much. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Carrie, and full disclosure, I haven't read that darn book in a long time either, so don't worry about it. Someone asked me the other day, do you reread your books? Because this is number 5. And I said,
oh my God,
not unless I have to.
Oh, my gosh.
So anyway, I'm not resentful of anybody who hasn't read it. But thank you for having me on.
I'm going to, because it's really interesting looking and just reading some of the reviews. And, I had Sue Tidwell, who wrote Cries of the Savannah on the show a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And that book, I'm more of like the science fiction or Dungeons and Dragons kind of a reader, and I don't read a lot of factual stuff or autobiographies or biographies at all. And I really enjoyed her book, so I will be ordering yours because it's along that same vein, and I have a feeling I would very much enjoy it as well. So I'm pretty excited to read it. So let us, now that the listeners are like, I have no idea what's going on, we are, let's explain to the listeners. You are obviously an author. How many books have you written?
Yeah, so this is number 5. The previous 4 were, I'm also let me take a step back. I'm also a professor of genetics at the University of Georgia. Actually, I head up our department here. And so the previous 4 books written over a span of decades are books for specialists in our field. And so they're really scientific books. This 5th book is a story-driven book, and it is a story-driven book about, as it says, you are exactly right. My book agent in New York City, B.G. Dilworth, who's number 2 agent in the whole country, he's really super, and he comes up with these really wonderful titles, and he presented this one to me for the book, and I said, well, that's real long. He said, trust me. And I said, yes, sir. So anyway, but it is definitely a mouthful, but it's descriptive. But this 5th book it really combines my passion as a biologist and as a conservation biologist, but mostly as a hunter trying to explain to non-hunters why hunting has fueled ecosystem restoration and community improvement, human community improvement, and how that works, because it works the same way all over the world, including North America. and why has it worked and that sort of thing. But using this one place, it's a large place, 1.5 million acres in Mozambique, unfenced, and how it was restored and how the local tribes folks have worked hand in hand with outsiders, but also have benefited and developed into a middle class there, basically.
So when people think of Africa, I mean, I guess I can't really say because I'm not in everybody's heads, but Mozambique it's just not the first thing that comes up. I don't really know what the first thing that really comes up. It's just I've never been interested in, and I told Sue this too, and anybody, and I've done a couple of African hunting. I have another one scheduled for next week. Africa has never really been on my radar. Number one, it's expensive, very expensive. It's very expensive to hunt there, and even more expensive to get the trophies back. It just seems like it's so dangerous all the time. What kind of, can you give me, I guess in 5 minutes or less, a brief overview of your experience in that particular area as far as, is it dangerous? Is it really expensive to stay there? Just kind of give me an overview of the area.
That's a great question. So Mozambique, as an area historically, was the heaven on earth kind of place for big game hunters in Africa back in, say, the 1950s, 60s,
okay.
Up until their civil war. And their civil war began and then in the 70s, and then it went all the way through 92, 17 years. And so it really shut down the hunting industry there and the tourism industry. Actually, Mozambique was the place that Africans and Europeans went for holidaying, not just hunting, but I mean, the beaches are gorgeous, the fishing is wonderful, the cultural aspects were absolutely drop dead gorgeous, and it was a safe place. And now today, it is, the Civil War obviously is long since passed, the country is stabilized, and it is a very safe place to be, especially in the southern portion and in the area I was in around the Zambezi Delta. It is an area where, you can go. You have to take malarial medication to keep from getting malaria as a visitor because it's tropical, et cetera, and it does have endemic malaria. But I find that to be trivial because of the number of places I go that I have to have a malarial prophylaxis, so I don't even think about that. But it isn't, it's that, I suppose. But in terms of crime and et cetera, I feel much more comfortable in Mozambique, not just in the camp area, but in Maputo. I was there for some meetings, et cetera. I feel very much more comfortable in Mozambique than I do in, I live close to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And there are many areas in Atlanta. There are many areas in Atlanta that I would not go into. In Maputo, I didn't find any. And so it's one of those things, where I know that people feel like it's foreign and it's dangerous, not just Mozambique, but Africa in general, maybe. I just came back from Cameroon and spent 3 weeks there, and it was wonderful, and it is much less developed than even Mozambique is. So,
yeah, you're right. A lot of it comes from just stereotyping. A lot of it's just sensationalism, things we see like in movies or TV shows, etc., where they want to. Africa's the big scary place where the guys with the rifles run around or whatever. And mm-hmm. There's such a big anti-poaching movement in that area. Mm-hmm. Which is incredible. Yep. It's just
it is, yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, and it is, and that's the kind of thing I'm working on. My next book right now, which is going to be a global view rather than just taking the model in Mozambique, but a global view of how people restore ecosystems using hunter dollars, how people do community development through hunter dollars. That's the main reason I was in Cameroon, looking at schools, looking at hospitals, looking at feeding people with the protein from the animals harvested, and then also the ecosystem restoration, protection, and the anti-poaching and that sort of thing. And so this Mozambique, the book that we're talking about, Bringing Back the Lions, it's not just ecosystem restoration in terms of allowing the animals to increase in numbers, which they have, and the plant life to come back, which it has, but also to reintroduce, that's the title, Bringing Back the Lions. There weren't lions there, and they should have been there. And the outfitters and the hunters wanted the lions to be there, not primarily to hunt, actually, but because they wanted the apex predators there. So the Cabela Family Foundation is the main, although not the only, but one of the main supporters, and they've spent literally millions of dollars putting lions back in there. And they've also, we were there in 21 when they put cheetahs back in, which will never be hunted by hunters. I mean, it's fine if they are hunted, because then they could bring in resources, but they won't be because they're protected. But they wanted that other apex predator in there. So it's that sort of thing that's such a wonderful series of stories. And this book has everything from beekeeping in it, because that's huge for developing folks in tropical areas. They love their honeybees and they love their honey. And so I have chapters on that. I have chapters on the songbirds. I have chapters on all sorts of different aspects of this recreation of this area. So it was a lot of fun to write.
Neat. So what other African countries have you visited, and how do they compare to Mozambique?
So South Africa.
Well, let me interject a little
Sure,
bit.
Go ahead.
As from a hunting standpoint, as well as a conservationist standpoint.
Yes, and that's a great question. So the countries, and I've made multiple trips to a number of these, but the countries so far that I've been in have been Mozambique several times, both in the bush and in the city, and then South Africa, Cameroon, I mentioned, and Namibia. We're going back to South Africa in June to do some hunting in the Eastern Cape, but also book research and magazine work. And we're also in South Africa to do rhino darting. I mentioned I'm in the professor of genetics. They wanted me to come over, and they have black and white rhino, and they're going to be taking samples to do population control and trying to figure out where they might reintroduce them. So they need to know the genetics of the herds that they're looking at. So we'll be able to be involved while they're darting and help them take samples. And they don't need our help, to be perfectly honest, but it is going to be so neat to be around both white and black rhino and to be able to witness what these guys and gals are doing. So we'll do that, but we're also going back to Mozambique, to this area the book is about, because I've been asked to write a magazine article called The Cats of Catata 11. Catata is a hunting concession. Catata 11 is this particular hunting concession where they've reintroduced lions and cheetahs. And Sportafield wants an update. They want an update on, how is it going? How are the reintroductions going? And so we're going to fly back in and spend several days there and photograph cubs and things like that. So that'll be fun. That'll be a lot of fun as well.
That's neat. Very neat. That's very neat. I have a interview next week with a gentleman who puts on safaris in South Africa. And I've done one. I did one several years ago with Brittany Booth, and it's just, I don't know, it's just a fascinating area to hunt. It's just, I just don't have endless buckets of money, and I don't have endless vacation days, If I had two of them, I would go.
Well, and see, I think one of the, and I am not going to be one of these people that says, it's less expensive than an elk hunt in
no, it's not.
the West. but it is on the surface, but in the sense that a really primo area, because I love elk hunting, really primo area for elk or something. And I'm not even talking about like a reservation situation, but a really primo elk place is going to cost you quite a bit of money. Okay, let's face it.
Sure.
And you get one animal, whereas you go to, say, South Africa or to Mozambique, and the baseline information and the baseline cost is less than that elk hunt. But you know, there are other expenses with, like you said, you know, getting your trophies back and that sort of thing, and the airfare, et cetera. Now, having said that, I can tell you that I have not met a person yet, and I'm sure they're out there, but I haven't met a person yet who's gone to Africa for a safari, wherever, and has not come back and said, or in the middle or at the very end of it, I've met them, say, on their safari over in Africa, who hasn't said, I'm going to be back. It just captures your soul.
Sure.
It is the most amazing place because you're out, and as you drive, it's not like a West Texas, I'm from West Texas, it's not like a West Texas whitetail ranch or something, which is really great. I love them, but you're going to see whitetails. In Africa, you know, in Katata 11, you're going to drive out and you're going to see 6 species of huntable game, and they're going to be in quality that you can hunt within the first, you know, 2 or 3 hours. And it just blows you away. It just absolutely blows you away that you're seeing this diversity, because it really is that cradle of diversity of so much. I'm a biologist, so I'm going to nerd out on them for a moment. But I mean, plant life, bird life, all this sort of stuff. It's just so amazing. It really is.
Is there just, not that I have any interest in doing one, but is there like a DIY style African hunt or do you always have to go with outfitters? I'm assuming you have, because a lot of the property is controlled, right, and licensed.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you know, there are some areas like Cameroon. One of the people I'm writing for is Roland Ward because they're supporting work in Cameroon, for example. And the person who heads that up, Ludo, as I understand it, because he speaks French and because he can do it, he has done some DIY in Cameroon. The problem is, safaris in Cameroon, the problem with that is that normally you need to know the local language, if it's not English for us anyway. I'm terrible. I tell people I don't even know good English. And so, you know, so you need to know that. You need to have the contacts there. And you also have to have areas that are actually open to the public. And those don't really always occur where there's not incredible poaching. And so it's already sort of destroyed and there's nothing there. So there's a lot of, you know, in Africa, but look, I'll tell you, it's the same way in Texas. You know, it's very hard to find public land there, you know. Yeah. I mean, it's mostly private. And so it's very similar in areas, not in Georgia. We have a lot of public land here that you can hunt, but in, you know, it's patchy in the U.S. as well. But anyway, that's the limitations in Africa in terms of doing DIY.
I know a lot of my listeners are DIY folks, so I know if I had the question, they probably had the thought. I don't know that I would want to anyway. It's a little different. I mean, it can be a shit show doing a DIY elk hunt in Utah, much less, or wherever, much less in frickin' Africa, where, you know what I mean? Where it's not just a 3-hour flight to get some help.
I'm imagining trying to carve up a Cape Buffalo by myself.
Right, you know what I mean? Like,
and cart it out.
and you're fending off wildcats and just, no thanks.
Well, I don't know about that part, but I'm just thinking about trying to lug out, you know, a 1,500-pound animal that you've now quartered. So I'm not sure without mules.
You're right. That's funny. You know, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just a wuss. I'd be like always looking over my shoulder. What's going to try and eat me now that I'm going to try and eat this? So let's talk a little bit about your book. Give the listeners kind of the nuts and bolts of what it's about and why they should purchase it to read.
Well, so this area, I mentioned the Civil War. This area in the Zambezi Delta is a tropical area, delta, so it's the end of a riverine system that dumps into the ocean there, just like the Mississippi does. So if you think about, if you've ever been into southern Louisiana, which is a place that I've worked for 30 years on various plant species, you'll know sort of what this delta area feels like. Lots of water, lots of humidity, beautiful, rich area for plant life and wildlife and birds and everything else, and game animals. Now, during the Civil War, the rebels moved in there. The folks who were with the government were in the urban areas, and the rebels were out in the bush, out in the country. The rebels moved in there, put in basically a meat packing plant, and so you went from, for example, 50,000 Cape buffaloes all the way down to 1,200 by 1992. You went from 25,000 water bucks, antelopes, to 200 to 300, animals left. You went from thousands of zebras that were there before the Civil War, and you had 8 of the animals left at the end. So this place was devastated with regard to protein sources. Anything that was a protein source, they killed and then shipped around to their rebel camps and fed themselves. And so at the end, you had outfitters, Mark Haldane and his partner came in, and they said, okay, they slowly began to build it back up with hunting very few animals each year, obviously. And now they have 45,000 Cape buffaloes back. Now they have, 15 to 1,800 zebras back. They have 25,000 water bucks back. They have bush bucks all over the place, and inyalas and all of this. So the game animals are back, but also the songbirds are back, and the forest is protected. And all of this from wood poaching, quote unquote, from charcoal making and for heating homes and that sort of thing. So you have these pristine areas. I call it an invisible line. As you're flying in on the helicopter from Beira, the local airport, local city, you go across a moonscape where there are not hunting concessions. And then you hit the hunting concessions, and it's almost as if you've hit an invisible, one of those electric lines that is keeping in the ground, that's keeping the dogs in. Well, you're keeping people out from destroying this. And that is the anti-poaching teams and the hunting teams that are out there who are constantly picking up the snares and the traps and arresting people and stuff and keeping them out of the area from tearing up the environment. At the same time that was going on, where they were building up the animals, they were also building up the human populations there. They built them schools. They fed them. So there's malnutrition of about 46% across Mozambique. It has one of the highest in Africa. In Katata 11, in what's called the Marameo complex, malnutrition is 0 among children. You don't have what's called kwashiorkor, which is that really swollen belly you see in photographs of kittles over there, where they're malnourished. That's a protein deficiency. That's a response to protein deficiency. And once you see that, the poor little guys and gals already have cognitive difficulties. They have a reduced lifespan, all sorts of terrible stuff. Well, that's not there anymore because they're feeding them off of the animals that are harvested, and they don't have to poach. And they have schools, and they have clinics, and they have new places to live, and they have agricultural fields that were put in by hunters' dollars. And so all of this, and they have a hunting production. I mentioned it earlier, but they have a hunting production industry that they've started there just with $100, buying the hives and et cetera, that is going to be self-sustaining in the next 2 years. And it is all of the money goes into the local community. And none of this cost them anything. It was all $100 investing, and then they had, the local folks took it and ran with it. So I tell those stories. I tell the stories about how people do agriculture there and how they are taken care of there and kept from dying from malaria, and et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why I say it's a story-driven book. I was terrified I wouldn't be able to write this book. I'd written 4 others, but they were science books. The feedback on this and the response to this in terms of sales and that sort of thing, and with non-hunters as well as hunters, it's been very encouraging. I've been very, very pleased, and that's why I'm working on this next book as well.
Neat. Very, very cool. Yeah, definitely want to get my hands on this book. I've got a long plane ride coming up in May, so it'll be something to read while I'm in the air, for sure.
Well, I hope you enjoy it. I really did enjoy putting it together. And like I say, and I know I'm not talking to a non-hunter, but I'm just saying that I think what I've been most encouraged about is the number of people who are friends who hunt, who have bought a number of copies. One guy bought 25 to give out to non-hunter friends. And I'm not talking about anti-hunters, although I have a friend who's in PETA, and she read it and met with me and told me that her mind had been changed. And I looked at her and I said, look, Kathy, you're going to have to unpack this one for me. You're a member of PETA.
Right.
And she said, well, look, I never want to hunt. And she said, I still think your trophies hanging on the walls are the tackiest things I've ever seen in my life. And I don't understand why you take trophies. But she said, I never knew that hunting funded ecosystem renewal and community renewal. She said, I've never heard that on the news. And I said, Kathy, you'll never hear it on the news.
Right.
That's probably unlikely you're going to hear it on network news. But I said, so anyway, I do think that, a Sue's book is the same way. I really do think that there's a voice out there in these sorts of books that we can give to our non-hunting friends. They may not agree with us, but at least they can be educated if they're willing to read it.
Right.
And they're not going to be put off by, a lot of blood and guts per se, but I mean, they can read it and say, oh, okay, I never knew that. That's what we're hoping for.
No, I 100% agree. I can't even tell you how many. I've done several interviews of like vegans and vegetarians who have turned hunters after they realize the conservation behind it. And it's not just, oh, you're just like wringing the necks of chickens in your backyard for the fun of it. It's, and I love that. You don't have to hunt. It's okay if you don't. Just like you didn't want to be a butcher. It's okay that you don't want to be a butcher in a slaughterhouse, but just eat the meat, whatever. Don't poo-poo people who do, It's all the same thing. Absolutely. So... Well,
absolutely.
I hope that a lot of people read this book and understand the conservation efforts behind all of it. It's just so fascinating. It really is. So.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope you enjoy it and hope others do. I know that we've had great. Like I say, it's been very, very encouraging, the response that we've had from it, and I'm pleased.
Awesome. Very, very cool. All right. Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us a little bit about your book and some of your experiences. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find the book, where they can find other books that you've written, and where they can find out more about you?
No problem at all. If they go to MikeArnoldOutdoors.com, that's the website. And if they do that, then they will, MikeArnoldOutdoors.com, just no spaces. There's a tab there for the book. They can also buy it on Amazon. They could buy it and, they can go to their local bookstore and order it, whatever they want to do. It's even over in South Africa because someone sent me a photo of it on a table in a bookstore.
Hilarious.
So I know it's in various places around the world. Actually, you can get it anywhere you are in the world, pretty much now because through Amazon. So MikeArnoldOutdoors.com, that is the website. It'll tell them about the magazine work I do as well. And there's a blog there, and they can sign up, et cetera, and get notices.
Excellent. All right. Well, Mike, thank you again for coming on the show, for taking time out of your day and chatting with us a little bit. And I will let you know as soon as this goes live.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carrie.
Yeah, you have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.